Hello, and welcome to another week of the Story Dogs podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we wrap our series for revival with Deluxe Volume 4, trade paperback 7 and 8, and single issue, man, I'm at 35 to 47?
36 to 47, close enough.
That's awful.
Yeah.
I don't know what's wrong with my brain. But anyway, series is over, full spoiler ban lifted, and in honor of that, I think I was talking about it in either the 0 or the 1. My superhero comp for this series was, which I think I told you, was the Kevin Smith Green Arrow Quiver. I think it was the first 10 issues there. Mm-hmm. And the basic 10? Premise, it's 10 or 12. But
well, the entire Kevin Smith run, I think, on that might have gone to like it went more than 10. But that first story
arc Quiver, was called Quiver.
Yeah, that might have been 10 issues, sure.
But that's the one where you get an Oliver Queen who is supposed to be dead, and then you see him looking like a very ragged version, and he's firing homemade arrows with like milk jugs attached to them, and you're like, who is this unhinged, crazy Oliver Queen? And all of the Justice League is trying to figure out what's wrong with him. You find out, like, I don't know, 6-7 issues in, that he actually did die in a plane crash. Somehow his body is still here, but his soul has departed and is separated. And his big heroic moment is his soul deciding if he wants to go back and be with his body or not, so he can be the hero and save the world. And similar comp here. Obviously, this has 4 to 5 times the complexity, just being basically a 50 issue series. Was that last issue a little oversized with the epilogue?
It might have been maybe a page or two.
Okay, I was like, yeah, sometimes your finale's like double sized or something like that.
Yeah, I don't think this was a supersized issue, but maybe a page or two longer. Yeah,
and ever since talking to Kyle Starks, I've realized that Image issues are 24 issues unless your first issue, and then you tend to get like 28 or 30 in the first issue. Or you can. You have the option
if you want. Yeah.
But not going forward, which is how we lost a whole issue of Assassination on the cutting room floor. But anyway, I was like, I'll call it 50-ish issues. Just it's easier to remember than 47. You add the Chew Revival thing in. And then a little bit of extra length, and the
free comic book day, the 5-ish. Yeah.
It's like just round it up, call it 50 issues.
You get pretty close to 50 issues worth of material. Yeah. Just shy of that.
So anyway, we frequently talk about this on the podcast, and I don't want to wait till the end of this episode. I want to rip the Band-Aid off.
Okay.
We talk about how difficult it is to stick the landing on a series. I think especially like the 50-ish issue series.
It's obviously much harder the longer the series goes. If it's a 6-issue book, or even like a 12-issue book, maybe it's two story arcs.
Where it's like you better have had the ending in mind when you started.
Exactly. It's much easier to land the plan in the ending because you probably already have all the beats laid out. Once you start getting up, I think, in the 20s and 30s, something like that, it just becomes exponentially harder because of, any good creative, I think, allows the story to go where it feels like maybe it's meandering versus being like a hardline, rigid, no, this is the way I planned it 6 years ago when I first thought of this idea. So the longer it goes, basically the longer it goes, the more balls you have in the air, the more plates that are spinning that you got to try and collect. So at the end here, I guess might as well ask it. How do you feel about the ending?
Well, I mean, I did ask you your thoughts, but I'm happy to go first.
Okay. All right. That fair. I flip that around on you. So I'll go first. I like the ending. I like what happens in the ending. I like how the story resolves. I like generally like all the components that go into like kind of solving all the mysteries. I think some of the issues that I have with the ending are mechanical in terms of how things were introduced, when things were introduced, some of the characters and character motivations that seemingly come out of nowhere. You know what I'm saying? Like I think a big one for me is Dr. Borchardt, who is Jordan's mom, the little girl we meet.
Right.
Um, you know, in the end, all of a sudden she becomes like this wildly important figure who has ties to the origin of the revivers, and that seems incongruent with her, I think, one appearance prior to this volume, which is when they dropped Jordan off at the farm. I think that's the only
Right.
time we've seen her father a couple of times, but the mother is like the critical one, and the fact that she has this direct tie to General K, to everything, to Aaron Weimer and Lester Major, all of this, that seemingly comes out of nowhere because there's no buildup to it. Now, so when I say I'm kind of issues with the mechanics of it, if that had been the case, like why wasn't that seeded a little more? Like you could have planted that seed in Deluxe Volume 2, like in trades 3 or 4, somewhere in the late teens or 20s in the issue run. You could have planted that seed there and not mentioned it for a dozen issues and then come back to it. And then it's like, oh, right. Remember that? You
I
could
mean,
have
you
put
could
a
have even
seed.
done something more subtle, like, when the local news reports that General Kale's coming to town, you have her say, General Kale? As if she knows her in a really
Yes,
ambiguous
yes,
way.
yes.
And
Yeah,
then you just
yes.
cut away.
Exactly. You can be more subtle than that. Like when they drop Jordan off at the farm, you know, her her reaction then is simply like, we have to do this because our daughter is dead. So it's like she has to, the only way she can deal with this is if she disassociates with what her eyes can see, that her daughter is back. Um, so it reads just like a parrot coping, right? A parrot that's just trying to process what's happening to them. This new information now, when you try to like retroactively apply that information back to that scene, it doesn't add up, And so that could have been a moment where, yeah, there could have been a look between, I guess General Kale isn't part of the story then, but there could have been some sort of recognition, some sort of idea that she knows more than she's letting on. And we just don't get that. And and that's one of those things I wonder if they thought about, Seeley and Norton from the beginning. It's something that we can say where we're going to be speaking with them next week, and you'll have that in the feed, an interview with both Tim Seeley and Mike Norton. But I'd be curious to know, like, how much was planned, because when you have a story like this that has a mystery at its core, multiple mysteries in that sense, not just the kind of the overarching one of like the revivers, where they come from, why they here, things like that, but then the other things like the mysteries specifically surrounding M and her journey and all of that. How many of those things, or what parts of those things did they have nailed down? Did they know what the specifics were? Were they always writing to the same endpoint? And then did they, like, what was the addition of Jordan's mom like oh, we have this character, let's use that? Or did they want to seed that in and just didn't get to it? I don't know. So like, I have no problem with them using a character that we've seen before. I just wish there had been a little bit of breadcrumbs,
Yeah.
a few hints here or there for something like that, because that reveal specifically comes out of nowhere. It feels like it comes out of nowhere for me.
I think you and I had almost the exact same review of the end of this,
Mm-hmm.
because mine was that I love the A story ending.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the what the story's actually about is
Yes, yeah.
great. It I This is me projecting my interpretation of the process onto them. So apologies for how unfair this may be, but I interpret a lot of the stuff at the end of this series as being like, the decision was probably made in issue 40 or 41. Like, okay, we're going to wrap at 47, and we've still got this whole notebook full of ideas. So you just start dumping um,
Mm-hmm.
character development, a plot, and even they're still introducing new characters
Yeah.
in the
Oh, you're right.
Deluxe Volume 4.
Right.
And,
Cannot forget the iconic Amish ninja assassin who shows up, and her
and
daughter. the who's also an Amish ninja
Right.
assassin.
But that
Yes,
could
yes,
have been cut with no consequence at
yes.
all.
Or that could
Um,
have been seeded earlier. It can go either way.
it could go either way, but seated from the very beginning is Ibrahim, who still never gets his moment,
Yeah,
and it's just kind of like shoved into a relationship with Dana
yeah.
in the epilogue. I
And he shows up in the police station, right, when they
He's always
barricade.
showing up.
Yeah,
I mean, he's
he's
just
there.
never doing anything
Yeah.
other than a couple surprise twists. So I think that is one that if I know the world of TV, and I think I do, I suspect they will tighten that up a little bit. They will give his character more of a spotlight, and they will tease that romance the whole time.
Well, and I think this is one of the benefits of when you're speaking about the adaptation, the benefit of knowing the entire story. And so they see, oh, at some point, um, Ibrahim is going to be, we're going to reveal that he's not just a doctor for the CDC, that he also has this side of being a CIA asset in some way, a motivated operator or incentivized operator or whatever the term was that Agent Geist used. And yeah, you can put little things in there that he's hiding something, you know? You don't have to explain what he's hiding, but you can make it clear that he's hiding something, which is not something that we saw in the comic. We don't see him. We see him calling back to Atlanta to speak to a woman who we find out is his sister-in-law, because his brother apparently is in jail for being a terrorist or suspected terrorist, whatever it is. But you never
Which
get the
there's no
sense,
payoff for that either.
none whatsoever. It's just to justify in a way the reveal that he's been working for the CIA. But yeah, all you have to do is seed something of him taking like emergency phone calls and we never hear them or things like that. You see him I don't know, you see him sneaking around someone's office when he thinks no one's looking or something the audience sees. Yeah, you can put little things in there so when you reveal what the secret is, it's like, oh, he's been doing this because he's also secretly working for the CIA. Yeah, when you have that foreknowledge of the entire story, you can absolutely pull things in. So I, I, I don't know if you're right or not, but I think your idea of Seeley and Norton kind of looking at where they are and thinking we're going to end this, whether we know we're ending it right at 47 or just knowing how many story arcs they have left. Yeah, looking back and saying, what do we have left to cover? What are some ideas we either didn't get to, or here's some ideas that, yeah, you're right. Like what's left in the notebook. I like that idea. And then you start throwing stuff out there and using that stuff to tie the larger stories together by throwing in this seemingly new stuff out of nowhere, you know?
Right. I mean, so let's talk about the number of okay, so I think we've only done a few comparable length series. The interesting thing to me is that Ex Machina and this are about the same length.
Yeah, but
And I think they both had the same problem of like story's great, main story's great. Just down the home stretch, there's just a lot of dumping of information. Like, oh, we had the baggage along for the journey
mhm.
of 100 issues, but we're going to wrap before that. So let's just, and instead of saying, let's just not use this, they say, let's just fit it all in. And in Ex Machina, it was like dumping all of the exposition about where his powers come from and the
Yeah, the other
other
dimension, right? Yeah.
dimension and the colors and whatnot. And
Hmm.
it's like, but we didn't need any of that.
Hmm.
The unwritten, I think, was a little better paced, but also kept fanning out more and more toward the end, even though it wasn't necessarily needed. But I think that was probably the tightest of the 50 issue books we've done. And then if you look at like the 25 to 30 issue books, those all seem so much tighter, so much more purposeful. Um, for instance, Kill or Be Killed. Everything there were no like wasted details, wasted side plots, unnecessary tangents with characters in that. Paper Girls,
Hmm.
airtight. I mean, Paper Girls. It's almost unfair to compare anything to it because it's just perfection.
So I was saying that
Um,
that's a near perfect book in terms of pacing and storytelling. Yeah, and I think there's something about that length maybe that the idea of it forcing you. And I wonder in those cases if you know, I wouldn't be shocked if someone like Brubaker and Phillips or BKV and Cliff Chang, like they probably mapped out like this is going to be 24 issues, it's going to be 30 issues, you know?
I
So,
mean, Brian K.
so
Vaughan said it's like 106 or whatever for Saga, and he
yeah,
said
yeah,
that for a very long
yeah.
time.
And so I wonder if something like that helps with your narrative pacing better than this is what the end is going to be whenever we get there, you know? So it's like instead of having the instead of knowing what the end is from your story, you just simply know how many issues you have to tell it. And that helps your pacing. Because I doubt Norton and Seeley were like, you know what's a good number? 47. We're going to end on that number,
Right.
you know? So
Although they probably knew they have 9 or 10 story arcs,
you're absolutely right
but
there.
how
And
it
so,
breaks
yeah,
is always the question.
yeah, so if you know how a story is going to end, but you don't know how long it's going to take to get there, I think that's an issue you can run into that we've been talking about. This idea of you you don't know when you're in it, how quickly or how slowly to dispense the various plot points and ideas that you have, versus if they didn't know exactly how it was going to end, but they're like, you know, we're going to go 40 issues and that's it. Or we're going to go 50 and we're going to end at 50. And then every decision they make in terms of what they add to the story or how the story meanders and how they follow it, how they chase it around, they know if the story starts to branch at some point, they react to it differently if it starts happening in issue 17 or 18 than if it happens at issue 42. If you know you're going 50 or whatever, you know, if you know that we're stopping hard at this number, how you dole on information changes. So yeah, I think that's just you know, it has to be a quirk of how the creators feel more comfortable, you know?
Yeah. Well, the other series I was thinking about that is in that range, although it's kind of cheating to say whether it's in that range or not. But if you combine Descender and Ascender, it's
Mhm.
about the length of this series. And I think as much as I love that series, that was probably had more messy side tangents, plots, things like it's like,
Yeah.
well, that and the pacing of that one, like there were some issues. Like I remember volume 3 of Descender being just like, here's a bunch of one shot
The one
backstories
shots.
for
Yeah.
every
Hmm.
character. It's like,
Hmm.
what are we doing here? Uh, that was one of those where it's like, if you're going to go for 50 issues, do one of these portrayed or something like that rather than just dump them all at once.
Yeah.
So it just felt, there's always odd choices. However, I'm always willing to grant, in fact, I think I should probably err in this direction that um, just because I don't see, just because I can't reconstruct it doesn't mean it wasn't there.
Uh,
Uh,
Absolutely. Yeah. And
and I think in this case, rereading this series and seeing Lester's prominence in issues like 1 and 2 and 3, and then how he's just constantly around is
yeah.
like, okay, so they definitely knew that part.
Yeah. And I think the same thing with Erwin Weimer, even though he dies, but the ideas of him, the flashback to his time in India, his book of poems,
Right.
so all of that stuff absolutely there. And we should say too, we should allow for the fact that we should acknowledge the idea that maybe a story twist coming out of left field was the intent as well. Like we have to account for that. Just because I or you may feel like it's jolting and jarring to be like, well, where'd this come from? We have to acknowledge and accept the possibility that that was totally the intent of the
Which,
creators.
I mean,
Yeah,
and I think you're basically saying, like, I didn't even hear you say, I don't like that twist.
yeah,
You're just saying, yeah, you wish it had been
yeah.
a
I'm
little
saying yeah.
less out of left
Yeah,
field.
I'm saying, yeah, my preference in terms of consuming a story, especially one that is revolving around some central mystery, is that when you get to the end, not that you could figure it out. I don't necessarily want to have all the things to figure it out before I get there, but I would like to be able to look back on a story and be able to pick up the clues on the back end, like on a reread. Because I think on a reread, if you know all the answers, when you go back through it, you can't find some of those crumbs. Some of the ones you can, like the ones you mentioned, Lester being around, Aaron Weimer, like you can that, like the teeth, you can see all these things. They're all there, but like there's no way you can predict Jordan's mom being important. You don't even know she's a doctor before it's revealed. You know,
I mean, there's
like,
no way you can foresee an Amish nun. Although,
yeah.
uh, 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 what is a Harrison Ford movie with the Amish?
Witness.
Witness. Yes,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, it's kind of like Witness, where he's pretending to be Amish and he's really,
Yeah.
a cop, lethal protector type person.
Well, okay, but hold on. That character, Atlee, she actually is Amish. I think that is the thing, is that she was raised Amish. She left, joined a gang, became a ninja, went back, and was living on the outskirts because she was being shunned by the community. But so she was actually Amish. She just also happened to be trained by like the Yakuza or something like that. I don't know. That's a character. So, I can knock that character all I want in terms of like really coming out of left field, but her presence in the story um adds some good character note, or allows for some really good character notes to come out of both Dana and M, because the idea of being a mother, being on her own. And so with Atlee and her daughter Fanny, there's a reflection there for Dana and Cooper, and then for M and her unborn child. So that there are some good conversations and some really good scenes that come out of that, because we have this character as kind of a weird funhouse reflection of them. It just the specifics surrounding that character are fairly absurd. And yes, she's just all of a sudden there, like opening scene. We're in Amish country, and she's holding a book and a wooden practice sword. So yeah, it's strange in that way, but there's some really good things that come out of it. So
Yeah,
as much as I knock, for me, the seeming randomness of this character to appear, I like some of the things that she brings to the characters because of what she's able to bring out of our main characters, the two that we really care about in Dana and M.
yeah. I will say I had to look up the word. I was very close, but it's quite the Rumspringa to go
Yeah.
study with assassins.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Well. She had joined a gang first. It seemed like they were robbing what looked like the Yakuza, and her crew
yeah,
got killed, and she
it's a
was almost
gateway.
killed.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
no.
she was almost killed, and instead of them killing her, they healed her because she was pregnant, and then trained her. So I don't understand why they would make that choice, but they did. So that's how we get a ninja an Amish woman who can also, wield a katana and throw throwing stars and things like that.
I mean, it also seems like one of those things that if I were Tim, I'd be like, Mike is going to have so much fun with this.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
like,
and it could be too, a lot of, you're right. A lot of writers will write the things that they'll ask them what they want to draw. I think of this funny story about that. Tom King right now he's writing Wonder Woman. The main artist is Daniel Semperi, but there are backup stories focused on this character Trinity, who is Wonder Woman's daughter. And those backups are being drawn by Belen Ortega, who is a Spanish artist. She's really wonderful. And there's one little backup story where it revolves Lizzie, the character Trinity, as a young girl, and kind of her two brothers, quote unquote, Jonathan Kent, Superman's son, and Damian Wayne, Batman's son, as a kind of like babysitter and whatnot. They're riding kangaroos on Themyscira because that's what kangaroos live on, Themyscira. And apparently Tom King was telling the story how Belen got back to him, and she's like, I live in Spain. I've never seen a kangaroo. Like, I don't know how to draw this thing. And he was like, fine. Well, what do you want to draw? What do you like to draw? And she's like, I like to draw corgis and samurai. And a few issues later, in a backup, Lizzie time travels and meets a samurai. And at some point, Jonathan and Damien get turned into corgis. So like he writes a story because it can be absurd, it can be weird, it's a superhero story, whatever. But you write to what your artist can do and the things they like to draw. So yeah, who knows? Maybe you're right. Maybe Mike wanted to draw. Mike wanted to draw some ninjas, some samurais or whatever. Ronin, I guess maybe. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I
just
gotta
to throw it in
say,
there.
I'm glad you went there with Wonder Woman. I didn't know the backstory on that, but I have been reading Tom
Mhm.
King's Wonder Woman. But I was thinking just like DC Metal when like that first issue, maybe it was the Forge or the casting or something, or maybe it was a Metal #1, but Batman riding on a raptor in like a intergalactic gladiator arena or
Oh
something.
yeah.
It was
Yeah.
just like is
Capullo
in
go to
no way
town. Yeah.
necessary to the plot,
Yeah.
but that was Scott Snyder. Like, here you go, buddy.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just like Greg Capullo.
Yeah. Go
Uh,
nuts.
yeah, go nuts
Cook.
with this.
Yeah. So you're right. Maybe it was like that, and maybe it was like we needed to introduce a character that was
That could track them.
well that could track them, so that could secretly work for General Kale, track them, and then plausibly make it turn against her and join up with So it's like we have to introduce a character. Why not make it a fun one? I could totally see that being the case. So
Yeah. Um, so I'm trying to decide if there's any other like major beats here. Like, I thought all the stuff with like, strip club, tattoo parlor, yada. It's like it did some good legwork story wise, but
yeah.
I wasn't super interested in it. And then
I,
especially when we got in volume 8, like anytime we were not with like Dana, Lester, I was like, come on.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
the B stories, C and C stories especially have
Um,
really lost their appeal now that we're in the thick of it.
I couldn't agree more. As you get down, I mean, I felt that way throughout all of this volume. You're right. There's the whole side story with Derek and the drug dealers and things like that. The guys who are the soldiers who are working, like all that stuff is there's character stuff there. Kind of Cooper's kind of there's some stuff there with wash it over me, especially on a reread now. Like I get to that stuff and it's like, you know what? I really don't care. I really don't care about any of this stuff. Anytime we're away from Dana and Em, uh, I'm with you. It really loses steam. But
That being said, I do think it was very good to have the kind of the so I will say January 6th has colored my reading of this volume 7 there
yeah,
because I was instinctively reading this as like these people are just terrible. Like they've gone guns, they're threatening the military, yada yada yada. A couple people like fire off and the military completely unloads.
yeah,
And I was like, oh, the military are bad too.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
Tim Seeley wasn't taking a side here. He's
yeah,
like, hey, here's two ways to be reckless and irresponsible.
yeah,
And then it's like, if you weren't picking up that the military is suspect in volume 7 or volume 8, good Lord, in
yeah.
volume 9, when they're
It's
literally
7 and 8. Sorry, it's 7 and 8.
7 and
Yeah,
8,
that's
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. But
When they're
you're
literally trying to separate their soldiers' bodies from their souls
yeah,
to gain this power, which it's like, look, as far as like supervillain plots go, that one's pretty straightforward. It's like we already have a camp. We can keep their souls in there. These soldiers can go around the world and do anything we want.
yeah. No, I mean, yeah, you're right. In terms of an effective super soldier as a weapon, I mean that's pretty good right there.
What would
And,
Amanda Waller do with that form?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there is it's right. I forgot about that scene there, right? That at the edge of the quarantine zone, right? Where
Yeah,
yeah, where it's just one thing sets off and then just everyone starts shooting,
yeah,
because of course everyone's got guns. So yeah, people just military fire in the crowd. It's not like a Kent State situation because the people like in the crowd, like they got guns too. They're firing back as well. Again, the idea of
it's
of
still a little lopsided.
it definitely is. It definitely is. But still, the idea that we've been talking about of building pressure in this town, because what does that lead to? That leads to like yet another armed militia, right?
Right,
This one led by the daughter of the rich guy who was dealing with Edmund Holt.
right.
We,
And they're
we
just
saw
going to get more organized every time.
Yeah. They take up in a mall, right? That's where
Yeah.
their base of operations is. They get to Kale's family and all that. So yeah, so of all kind of we'll call them the resistance movement here in terms of against the government, the man there. Yeah, they were the most organized. They ended up being the most organized. And so it's just again ramping up the pressure. What does that do to the town? What does that do to these people? Eventually they're going to fight back, and not necessarily saying that they're noble for doing so, because the way they go about it sure isn't noble. And you're right, the military isn't shown as being, they're just there kind of doing what they're told up until the point where they get fired on, and then they just start shooting everybody, and then to the point where we get to the shootout at the end, right on the river, where again everybody's just shooting everybody, you know.
Yeah,
It's
it's
just
unhinged. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
it's completely unhinged
Yeah.
behavior that like well that and it was also felt like I was surprised that General Kill died. She never struck me as a character who's going to die, and I thought that was a good surprise because I was thinking to myself like,
She get out of
well,
this.
okay, but I was like, you can't really put a cork back in this thing. You can undo what happened here, but if
Mhm.
the playbook for how to replicate it still exists, the army is never going to be like, oh, sure, we had that information, but let's never act on that again. Um, Someone would try it. So it's one of those where it's like almost everyone involved basically needs to die in order for everyone to be
Yeah.
safe.
So real quick though, so on that note, jumping ahead all the way to the end, the little coda piece there with Aaron Weimer's widow,
Yeah.
Nithya. What do you make of, or what's your read on how we, the audience, are maybe meant supposed to take that final page? So on that final page, she's somewhere in Tennessee. She's buying a house that is on a river, and we see her holding Aaron's book of poems there, Banks of the Broken Creek, which is the source text that he put the
Right.
the ritual whatever into. What is your sense of how we're supposed to read that?
That's a great question because when she says to start over,
Hmm.
that could be starting the revival over. That could be starting over with her marriage, and maybe
Hmm.
she has something of Aaron's corpse or something and feels like she can,
Oh, bring him back.
bring him
Well,
back.
he burned up. I don't know. I
But also, like, why would she want him back? She seemed pretty pissed. She
she
found out
did
about
seem yeah,
everything.
yeah.
Um, so maybe she's just like, oh, well, I've now figured out what he was working on, and once I build the life I want, I'm gonna lock it in permanently.
Okay, all right.
Which
Yeah,
is maybe a little lestery of her.
very much so. I was just curious because I read that thinking like not that they're setting up a continuation of the story, but maybe just the idea that it could go on, that because the book is still out there,
Right. Yeah.
and the way that Norton draws that, um, she's very specifically looking out at the river, you know. So
Right.
so again, the idea of water that we talked about, which we know is critical to whatever this ritual is. So there's an intention in the way that he draws Nithya as she looks out from the porch in over the water into the river as she's holding the book, which makes, it implies that she knows what the book is and picks this location for a reason. So I don't know if we're supposed to read that as the story goes on, but it doesn't actually go on because there is no follow up, you
But
know?
I mean, that's the thing
It
about
it's like a
indie
stinger at
comics
the
and
end.
comics is like
Yeah,
you can always go back if you want
yeah,
to.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
I never thought the Sweet Tooth, the return would happen,
Hmm.
and it didn't need to happen.
Yeah.
In
And it's
fact,
it's fine. It's fine.
it was fine. It
Yeah.
didn't add anything to it, but it was just like if you want a little more time to bask in that world. So
Hmm.
I really don't see, and I'm not just saying this because of the guy's schedules and availability. I just don't see substantively
Oh, yeah.
doing another 40, 50 issue run of this, but a 6 issue miniseries, perhaps after the TV show comes out as like a little, hey, that was fun. That sparked a new idea. Here's a 6 issue what if
I
for
mean
us.
that's not. I think that's definitely in the realm of possibility. We've seen something. I mean, part of that also was, I mean, Sweet Tooth: The Return came out while Sweet Tooth was on Netflix. So,
Yeah.
so maybe, yeah, you're right. Lemire working on that and being involved with that sparked something to get back into it. Um, so yeah, maybe they follow up and there's, yeah, a little mini series with Nithya and her adventures, and you find a way to bring the Cypress Dana back in to stop or whatever it is. So, I was just curious about why you put that kind of coda there. Part of me thinks it's just like a wink to the audience, you know, just to put it out there as uh one
Yeah,
little
that
jab,
like this knowledge is out there now.
yeah, it's not meant to spark anything extra, but you just put it out there just because you can. So yeah, I don't know. So what do you feel about this story ultimately having I'll call it a happy ending, for our main characters, How,
Well,
are,
I mean, Martha has the very bittersweet ending, and
yeah,
I will
yes, yeah,
say, I knew she was dead the whole time, and I'm rereading it, and I still think, now maybe this is just because I've become more sentimental since having a kid. Her having the little conversation with the ghost spirit of her daughter,
yeah,
uh, that one like got me a little bit, not like teared up or anything, but it was just like, oh, her death feels a lot more meaningful
yeah,
now.
yeah. And
Um,
there is that great double splash too,
oh my
when
gosh, it's
when
gorgeous.
she is shown the visions of what the life would have been had she lived, you know,
Yeah,
seeing all the things. And I think what I love about that scene there is that it's not all happy things. Like it's also like, yes, here's your kid as a baby, as a toddler. Here's you fighting when she's a teenager. It's all of that. And she gets the lifetime of memory and experience. It's a beautiful page there. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm saying overall happy. I think you had a sense. I think once you know she's pregnant and that the child is important, I think savvy story readers can be like, probably not killing the kid. So like the kid's gonna live, but the mom's gonna, like I think you could talk yourself into that going into it. Like, if you know how these kind of stories work. But I do think it was, yeah, bittersweet's a good word there, make her sacrifice there. But I'm saying overall, like the way it resolves, you have, in that final melee shootout, the other revivers come down and basically form a human wall because they can't die, to help protect the our main characters. And then ultimately all the souls return, everyone burns up, all the revivers are gone, and life gets back to normal. And we see M's daughter there, what Patricia, named after her mom, with her cousin Cooper. Like, so ultimately they get a happy ending. Everyone is together and said life moves on. Are
yeah.
you
Well,
okay with
okay.
that?
No, I love that. I do love
Okay.
a happy ending. I hate when people feel the need to stick it to the readers. Just like leave something emotionally unresolved or something like that.
Mhm.
I don't think that takes anything away from the series. Like I remember when Deathly Hallows came out, and one of the few criticisms at the time where there were like a few really book snobby reviewers, like I don't know, probably New Yorker or something, who said like that epilogue was absurd. Like there's no way these characters would be that, well adjusted and normal and happy. They should be deeply traumatized. And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, it is a children's series, so let's calm down. I guess young adult series at that point in time.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And if you want a young adult series that ends in a really bleak way like that, read The Hunger Games, because
Yeah,
that'll give it
there
to you.
there are other books that are out there.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but the
And
one,
even that's fairly upbeat.
yeah, like your character's basically suicidal, rejects a skin graft.
Yeah,
Her sister died, and that's what the whole
yeah,
series was about, was her protecting her sister.
yeah.
But uh, so I guess it's similar to this in some way. But the one person I think did not deserve a happy ending, and I don't really know why it's there, is like, how is Dana just there, cool, visiting Lester? Like, is he not the biggest piece of garbage
Yeah,
in the whole
yeah. Well,
series?
yeah.
Like,
Well,
is
I
he
mean,
not the most selfish, arrogant piece of crap And he
Well,
knew what was causing all of this all along, and he just
yeah.
let everybody suffer. He let the revivers suffer, disjointed from their souls. He let all the victims that he was murdering and continued to murder throughout this series suffer. And then we're supposed to like feel bad for him on his deathbed, and she
Well,
has a little witty banter with him about like his speeding tickets. I'm
I
like,
don't
no, he killed your sister
I don't think you're supposed to
twice.
I don't think you're supposed to feel bad for him. I think um yeah, I
But
mean because
Dana does not, I mean, Dana was ready to murder him.
yeah.
And then it's like 2 years later, oh, I guess I'll visit him on his deathbed and give him a happy send off. I'm like, I just don't, it's mighty big of her. I just don't know why she got there or how.
I
It's a 2 year gap. There are reasons, but
that's fair. And um yeah, and also like how is he not just immediately thrown in jail? You know,
right. Yeah.
or was he in jail and he's just there? He's moved there because that's a fair criticism. That didn't bother me at that point, but I see your point there.
Well, okay. So
Because
this is my reread. So I went through this entire series knowing what a piece of garbage he is, knowing that he's the
yeah,
killer.
yeah,
And I keep looking for like all these little clues and Easter eggs, and they're there. Man, are they there?
yes, yeah, and that's
All
what I was
throughout the
talking about. And
series.
that's what I was talking about earlier about the idea of when you know the end and you go back, everything you know about Lester, every single appearance changes because now you have the full context, and that's a good thing. That helps the rereadability. I like that, and you're totally right. You can see that like he's more than just he's more than just kind of a lecherous creep, which is how you read it the first time. You know, like now you understand the weight and the gravity of it.
Yeah. So, extremely well done there. But all of that just made me hate him more as I go through the series. And I forgot that for some reason he and Dana have reconciled, or
Yeah,
maybe she just decides to be the grown up. Maybe being a parent does that to her.
I think that is a fair reading of it. That this experience has
And he kind of saved the baby, right? I mean, he's the one who like pulled her out of the water.
yeah, well, yeah, he saved it selfishly because he figured that was going to give him that's what the baby was going to be because M being pregnant is what screwed up the ritual to begin with. That him taking the baby would complete the ritual and he would then
Yeah.
reach immortality, which was he was trying to do the first time.
So
So
five
yeah,
pages
it's
before the end,
yeah.
Dana's got a gun to him while he's holding the baby, saying, "Look what he did to you. I should have killed him in the garage. I should have."
Mhm.
Uh, and it's like, okay, so we go from there, and M says, "Don't shoot him. You'll only hurt Patty." That's why she doesn't shoot him.
Yeah.
Then M dies. Dana is very sad. Lester realizes it isn't going to save him. Says, "No, I just wanted to live." Oh no, all I wanted was life.
Mhm.
As he's falling to the ground, and the last interaction we see between Dana and Lester is her with a gun to his head being stopped by M, and then the next one you see is him on his deathbed, kind of wry smile, witty banter back and forth between the two of them. I was like, yeah, it's just too soon. It's too big of a jump for me. I want to stick it to him because this
Yeah.
one was like, this is not a guy who I my recollection, and sorry if this is a spoiler for Sweet Tooth, but my recollection of Sweet Tooth is that it was like archaeologists digging in an indigenous burial ground or something like that, and they accidentally uncovered this virus, not necessarily doing anything malicious unless you consider archaeological extraction from indigenous people
Yeah.
to be an ethical gray area, which is totally fair. But they weren't doing anything, malevolent or malicious, ill intent,
Mhm.
at any rate, and they just happened to unleash this curse. This guy knowingly released a curse, then kept it going and killed people to cover it up as the story goes on, or had people killed. And it's like we have a clear villain here. This was not like
Yeah.
a whoops a daisy, just trying to cover my tracks here. This was a lot of forethought and malicious intent. So I think that's why I kind of wanted to see him die cold and alone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
I try to make it sound nice, but there's no nice way to say what I
yeah, well,
wanted
it's okay.
for
So
him.
maybe Dana's just a better person than you and I, because I understand where you're coming from, and had that been the case, like had that been Lester's end, uh, I wouldn't have been like, well, that was unfair for him. Like I would have been totally fine. Like I
And it
whatever,
would have been kind of bittersweet in his own way. Like the poor old
Yeah,
man who,
yeah,
was once someone around and was afraid to die,
mhm,
dying alone in a bed or something like
yeah,
that, or in a
yeah.
prison cell.
Well, he was
Um,
afraid of dying in general.
yeah,
So
right.
instead, what he got was apparently just a slow, long 2 year death. Which is, legitimately his worst nightmare. So, yeah, I don't know. I
So,
think,
what did you think about all the ink spilled on, I'm blanking on his name, the skateboard Jesus guy?
oh, yeah, on Rhodey. Yeah.
Very cool scene. He knocks off his
Not
own
as,
arm
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
stabs
So,
someone through the throat with it. But like, why?
well, and also,
Why is he in here at all?
why does his arm not grow back?
Well, that's an interesting question because I was wondering, like, if it grows back, I bet it is slow. Little
Well,
Deadpool 2 where his
and,
legs
and,
take a little
and,
while to grow back.
and that's fine.
But I
Okay.
think
But
they mostly reattach, which is why they have all stitches. Like when
I,
things get
I,
severed, they
I
somehow
guess, I
float back
guess.
together and restitch. Um, I also thought
I
like,
don't
oh
know.
well, he's just gonna have a spare arm soon.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
and they did resist making any like lend me a hand type puns.
I think with him, it was a matter of they needed someone on the farm to be the disruptor, you know?
Yeah.
And he was obviously he was the only choice in terms of the characters we knew who had been introduced. Because yeah, he's obviously introduced as a foil for M, but then like once he's in the farm, like he never sees, like they never interact again. So he now just becomes an antagonist for General Kale. That's it, and he sets you know he's the one that escapes the cell. He sets he sets all the souls free, and then that allows all the survivors to escape. So I think they needed someone to be an instigator, and he just seemed like the likely choice. And then once his role was done, he could eventually die. So
Yeah. I have to say though, in volumes 5 and 6, I think I like General Kale. Maybe it's just because it's a good, like, well written character,
mhm,
but I thought she was smart. She was interesting. She very quickly narrowed down on a working hypothesis for like
mhm,
what was going on, how to fix
mhm,
it. Um, and then we got like her home life a little bit, which
mhm.
didn't really end up mattering other than some derogatory slurs thrown her way. Um,
Well, her wife and son get killed.
adopted son, yeah.
They get killed.
Well, he gets or she gets killed too,
Well, yeah,
but
but they get killed under the orders of General Kale when they shoot up the militia, you know,
right.
because they're all wearing masks there. So I mean, yeah, she does turn a little megalomaniacal in the end, pretty hard.
Oh,
And she becomes
what's
fairly one
impressive
note.
is that she has got so many factions working against her
Hmm.
by the end.
Yeah.
She's got the assassin she recruited now out working against her.
Hmm.
M and Dana obviously working
Hmm.
against her. You've got the mutiny in, from all the revivers, all the reviver advocates. And it's like, man, everybody on her side is in the federal government, not in this book. Like
Yeah.
she's kind of on an island there and, holds the responsibility pretty well given the situation she's in. Extremely tough assignment from the army. But yeah. So anyway, I thought she was one of the more interesting characters in the series. Part of me wishes she had been introduced a little earlier. That being said, we did get plenty of time with her, and
We
there's
did.
nothing for her to do to kick around for 47 issues. It's just she became so important by the end
Yeah. Well,
that it felt like
again,
she
as we
should have been
talked
there.
about, she was introduced at a point when it seemed like the series could have reached an end, because it was all about the small town and what the town folks were dealing with. And then after the mayor dies because the courthouse blows up and all that, it's like, well, where can we go next? Well, now it's full federal government and military involvement and control of the town now. So she's brought in at that point at a logical point in the story. But you are right. We didn't get a whole lot of time with her, but I think as a character overall, I think her use was good. Again, I think she does make a turn to being just like more evil at the end, you know, like completely uncaring,
Right.
which we hadn't seen prior.
She just becomes, I mean, she's always been kind of a ends justify the means and also very much
Yeah,
a I'm looking to do my job and get out of here. I'm not looking to relocate here permanently. This isn't,
yeah,
this
yeah,
is why I'm here.
yeah. Well, and you're right. She not only susses out what the spirits are, the souls are, and the relationship to the revivers. She does also figure out way to how can we use this? What does this mean? It, it's not just eradicating this town; it's how can we use this as an asset? And so yeah, if that's cold and calculating, well, she is military. There's a sense of compartmentalization there of like not seeing these as people and whatnot. They're assets. Which actually does bring me to a question, something that I've been thinking about because I had a conversation with my brother about this, and he asked me this question, and I didn't really quite have an answer. I've been thinking about it, but I want to ask you this as well. Um, do you, Mike, as the reader, consider the revivers to be alive? Because in the context of the story, generally the townspeople, with no other options, they do consider them being alive,
Hmm.
because they come back and they go back to their jobs and deal with them as such. But knowing what we know now, that they're alive, they're around, they are effectively themselves, but they're missing their souls as
Yeah.
they're referred to.
So let me
So
tell you
do
what
you
my
consider them?
criteria, let me tell you
Yeah.
my criteria, and you tell me based on my criteria if you think they're still alive.
Okay.
My criteria for them still being alive would be can they still grow and advance as a person, or are they permanently stuck in kind of their mental, emotional state that they were in at the time of their death? Because that would make them like ghosts, like they're here with unresolved
Mm-hmm.
business. Um, they're definitely undead, but I think in order to be alive, they would need the ability to continue to grow intellectually, emotionally, maybe physically. Like, would they keep aging even though they can't die? If they lived long enough, because you know,
Well,
M does grow physically because she got a baby in her, but that's
so
one of
what
the
what I would
exceptions
say
as
to
well.
that is, I would say like 2 out of 3, yes, we do see characters grow emotionally, and we don't. I don't think they would age, but we see a number of revivers change how they think, how they view the world. We see M change as a person to grow kind of psychologically and emotionally. So I would say that we have
Well, and
seen
I'm
that.
not talking about like the angry outbursts that
Yeah, yeah,
are
yeah, yeah,
clearly
yeah,
the symptom of it. But
yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah.
I agree with you on M.
Yeah, and I think the other the genie character, well, she did kind of go off the religious deep end there, but clearly there was a change in her character and her understanding, and I think her followers, the guy, the after Genie dies, I'm blanking on his name. The guy who's kind of one of her followers. He was the used car salesman dressed
Yeah,
up as a
yeah.
wizard. We see growth in his character. Because he's the one that leads the revivers down to the river during the shootout. Yeah, I think you can make the argument that they have grown. They have grown emotionally and psychologically, or they have the capacity to. Um,
Whereas, like, yeah, I was thinking on the flip side, you got a guy like Brody who
yeah.
seems to learn nothing ever any of the time. However, that might have
Well,
been what he was like when he was alive the first time,
That
and there
that's
are those people
that's what
out
I was
there.
going to say. Yeah, just because you have the capacity to doesn't mean you actually do. You know. So yeah, he just seems to be. It amplifies his the worst traits of his character and personality. But yeah, so I I think the question as it was framed to me, I think, is the idea of the soul, since that's the word that they use. These
Yeah.
are beings who are separated from their souls. And so what is it that makes a person alive? Is it the soul there? Is that the thing that lives on, or is it the being, or is the being just, a meat sack? Is it just a vessel? Um, and I think I don't know if that's a question that Seeley and Norton were really trying to explore or wanted to explore, because it really does bring up a potentially thorny issue about the baby. You
Right. I
know,
mean, you're getting really
yeah,
heavy into Greek philosophy right now.
yeah, yeah.
It's like all they did
Yeah,
was sit around and think about the soul all the time.
yeah, yeah. And I don't think this is not a book that's about that. It's not what they're trying to say, or even I don't even think like hinting at. They're not concerned with that. But it is
I don't think they're not offering a point of view on it.
absolutely not. Yeah.
But it's
So,
kind of a mirror that they just hold up to you. It's like,
yeah, and that's exactly where I was going. It's not something that they're even concerned about with their story, but when you put a little bit of thought into it, it raises some questions in terms of how you see what is life, what does it mean to be alive. um I think the place that I've come down on it is, for lack of a better term, I would consider the revivers alive, you know absent of their soul. I think in this specific case, because of how we see what they are, that the soul has been separated from them versus
yeah, as long as
versus
the soul is intact.
yeah. It's like the soul, the soul was removed from the body and is trying to reunite. And so it's like a matter of perspective. It's like the body wasn't taken from the soul, and we're not following the soul around. We're following the body around, the person around. And that's like the prime location, and the soul was taken from that. And so the being is still alive. It's just missing a part of it. And the soul in this case is not what makes it alive. I don't know if that extends to the larger existential question of what it means to be alive, but I think in the context of this story, I view the revivers as being alive because of what they've presented in terms of what the souls are, how they look, how they operate, how they act. I think of it that way, but I think it's open to interpretation for the reader, because it isn't important to the story, because they don't give a definitive answer, because it's not concerned with that sort of thing. It is just an open ended, how do you view the world? How do you view the larger idea of what does it mean to be alive? Instant. In this case, I think the revivers are. I would consider them that way.
Yeah, I think I do too, with the caveat that I think the one thing that the story is definitely the point of view they're definitely conveying is this isn't natural. This isn't how it's supposed to be.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, sure. Yes. Yeah.
no one is content with this arrangement.
Yeah.
Like whatever the natural order is, theologically, biologically,
Yeah.
ethically,
Existentially. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, uh, all of those factions agree this is wrong.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's just not how things ought to be.
Thus
Uh,
making whatever happens here total exception from how things quote unquote are actually are. Whatever that is, however things truly are in the grand scheme of things, this is an exception, right? So it doesn't
right.
matter. It doesn't matter what the actual answer is. This is unnatural, and so it is an exception.
Well, and I think a philosopher would tell you, um, because of that, you cannot use the words alive or dead. They have to be a new distinct category, which the
Yes.
book also concedes by calling them revivers. And,
Yes.
they'll say like, we can't live, we can't die,
Yeah.
no
But
one
they.
no one wants us here,
Yeah.
including heaven.
Yeah.
That was like a really gut-wrenching
Yeah.
panel there where
But someone like General Kale uses the terms of this is how you kill them,
right, and you
So
can't kill
yes,
what
yes.
isn't alive, right?
This is how a reviver can die, and so yeah, you can't use those terms unless you are using terms alive and dead. And you're right. If we're really parsing our words, you would have to come up with new words for that. But in the lack of those words, you can default to alive and dead. But in my mind, I would consider them to be alive. I think that's where I've come down on it.
Yeah, I think that's more or less where I come down.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I actually don't have that many more notes because I know of the forthcoming conversation with Tim and Mike to
Yeah.
like really put a button on things.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I will say I could not help but speculate on this reread stuff in the show. Like,
Oh
are,
yeah,
are they
definitely.
going to
Yeah.
cut characters? Or are they going to have a huge cast? Is it
Hmm.
going to be a 6 1-hour episodes or 12 1-hour episodes? Or is it going to be 3 or 4 seasons of 6 episodes apiece, with
Yeah.
like 42-minute run times? Like,
Yeah.
are they going to try to streamline this and get it done to make sure the thing gets completed?
Hmm.
Or are they going to try to drag it out? And I suspect no one will be allowed to talk about that. In fact, like, I kind of want to ask, like, what's the tone going to be? Is this going to be Twin
Yeah.
Peaks in tone? Is it going to be
Yeah.
X-Files in tone? Is it going to be
A
more
procedural.
lighthearted? It could be
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
procedural. You could also try to go more lighthearted and like kind of downplay the violence. You could probably lean into the violence and go a little more gory horror
I mean,
type stuff,
it's
especially if the TV show were to drop like next October.
I'm saying
It was like
it's
undead zombie type thing.
it's on Syfy and I know they just canceled the show as we're recording this, but like that ran the Chucky series, and Chucky obviously is a horror franchise. So yeah,
I
they're
think did Sci-Fi make Preacher as well?
no, that was on AMC.
AMC. Okay.
That was on AMC.
I
Yeah,
knew it
yeah,
was
yeah,
I knew it was a
yeah,
cable,
yeah.
not a streamer.
So yeah, I think we have a lot of questions about that, and I'm with you, knowing that it's coming now. That show is coming. You do think about those questions in terms of how far, like, do they end the pilot the same way they end the first issue, or do they go further? Like, where do they make their breaks in the story? Um, and do they feel like they have to be beholden to the breaks that are in the comic? Because I think if you feel that way, I think it's too limiting.
Yeah.
In my mind, I want adaptations, especially in when you have the whole story, you can then divide it and you can pull information from different points to tell the story that you want to tell because you don't have to tell this story because the comic is the comic. You're telling your version of it. You don't have to tell the same thing. Otherwise, just read the book.
Right. I
So
mean, they could change the killer even. Like,
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't
They
think I would like it, but I think they
yeah,
could.
yeah.
They could have made M's boyfriend the killer, Professor Weimer, but then you have to change who they investigate, who they suspect.
Well,
You have to ask why they're not suspecting him earlier.
Well, and I think what you have to drill down on is what's actually important. What's important to the overall narrative is not that Lester is the ultimate mastermind and killer. What's important is that the person that kills M, A, didn't know she was pregnant, and B, did so specifically to do this ritual to gain immortality, and it went wrong. So that person can be anybody.
Right.
The what matters is the reasoning behind her murder, not who does it. You can then so yeah, you could apply that reasoning to anybody. You could make it Aaron and make him a larger character, and he could be investigated for the murder, and he could be cleared. Because he covered his tracks really well, and then you could double back to him and all that. So there are a dozen ways you can make that work, and not feel like it has to be the old fitness guru guy. You know, you could totally streamline it, and I think they probably I don't know if they have to because I mean we started this conversation weeks ago on volume one talking about how many characters were introduced, and we get to the end and how many of those characters are really important.
Right. I
You know
mean,
how
not that I wouldn't say that a character has to have a major impact on the plot in order to have a name and be part of the texture of the series.
Mhm.
Especially with the series that goes this long. If it was a 12 issue series and introducing 7 characters, it's like, come on, guys, what are we doing here? But in this length series, it's okay to have like a little bit of misdirection with like, oh, here's some characters that might be important. Who are you going to follow? Especially
Yeah,
since they clearly knew who you needed to keep track of from the beginning. Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
when you go back and read it,
yeah,
it's just so obvious.
yeah.
So anyway, yeah, those are all my thoughts. But anything else you want to talk about?
I don't know if I have anything
I'm
else
fair
here. I
game.
think I already mentioned how I was going to bring up what I thought just kind of the best panel, the best page of this era, and I think
That
it's
splash.
I think it's that moment, yeah, when M sees the future memories of the life she might have had with her daughter Patty. I think that's a really wonderful scene. I think you're right there that it that's a moment where she gets her happy ending right there for M, because she knows what's going to happen. She knows what's coming. She's made the choice to sacrifice herself for her daughter and for everybody, knowing that this is going to end the revivers. And she gets that moment, which I think is really beautiful. Um, I think with the last note that I actually have that we haven't gotten to, I actually had it at the top. We got into the discussion, so I didn't know how to break it. But we do want to we do try to make a point to acknowledge everyone who works on the book, all the creators, all the creative
Oh, right. And
forces.
this had a
And yeah, and
contributor again.
issue 46 had a couple of additional colorists. Alan Pascalacqua and Dee Cunniffe. They're just listed as colorists, additional colors, and they worked on issue 46. Um, I went through it, and I don't see anything. Like, there was no change in art, there was no change in like setting, like there wasn't a flashback where you might use something different. So I don't know what was there. Maybe it was a deadline thing. I couldn't see anything demonstrably different as to what they might have contributed, like a
No, but
specific story reason.
I
So
mean, I think in issue 46 of a 47 issue series, you're not looking for someone to come in and make an impact. You're looking to just get the thing done.
well,
And you
that's
want to
well,
match the vibe.
that's what I was saying. Sometimes when you bring a colorist in, maybe it's because you have a special scene,
Right.
like you want to have, um, for example, the page we just talked about, that double splash of M seeing what her life would have been like. Um, you could have done that in a way, because that's colored, the way that's colored. It's like it has a filter over it, right? Because it's hazy, it's memory, it's things like that.
Right.
You could have brought someone in to do something totally different with that, so this is something different. So you bring in someone just to work on those pages because you want that to be different. And I'm saying issue 46 doesn't have anything from a story standpoint, from a visual standpoint, that you would seem would necessitate having additional colorists to do something different. So yeah, for whatever reason, they were brought on. Said maybe it's just a deadline thing, and they needed someone to come in, a couple of guys to come in to just help out and get the issue finished. But at least one to call them out. Pascal Aqua and Cunniffe. Couple guys came in, pinch it maybe for a page or two. Who knows for how much on just a single issue there. So one to call them out.
Yeah, definitely. Always good to give them a shout out.
Yep.
Um, I think I'm going to celebrate completing this series by. I have a patchwork collection of this series. I have some of the trades digital, some of them paperback, a couple spot issues. It's a mess. I'm going to celebrate by getting the compendium.
Yeah. I think when we recorded the zero, we said it was coming out or had come out. It did get pushed publication wise.
Yeah, I
And so,
believe as we're recording this, the second week of October, I believe it is officially out,
or it's either it's either
or will be
or
out by the
it's
time this
coming.
episode.
Yes, yeah. By the time it should be out sometime in October 2024. So whenever you're listening to this, it may have come out a week prior in terms of when this is hitting your ears. But yeah, the compendium looks great. It will be out at some point. It's on the schedule. It's coming out at some point. It does look really, really great. I have, I have the digital versions of the deluxe editions. That this feels like maybe when the companion comes out, yeah, maybe getting it, because I'm sure to look good on a shelf. It's one of those books that 47's a little big in terms of reading for me at least.
Oh, for me,
Uh
it's the perfect. You lay in bed, you lay it
yeah,
flat, and you just can tear
yeah,
through it.
yeah.
Yeah, sitting in an armchair, certainly riding the bus to work or something like
A
other
little
places you
tougher.
might read a comic, you're not
Yeah.
reading
Little tougher on
a
that. Yeah.
compendium there.
Yeah, but it will look good on a shelf. So yeah, maybe I'll pick that up as well, just to commemorate kind of the end of this, because
I mean, I like the compendiums to me are basically, buck 25 an issue, and
yeah,
those are my reader copies. Like
yeah,
I those are more banged up on my shelf than like the regular trades or hardbacks or certainly the single issues, which I kind of baby to an extreme. Uh, my Saga compendium looks like it's been through hell and back, but I've read it twice and I can still read it anytime I want because, it holds together pretty well. And I got it for basically a buck an issue. And it's just like the
well,
compendium is an incredible value if you don't
yeah,
find reading it unwieldy. This
Yeah,
one
yeah,
comes with, you know, never before used, not new, but never before used Jenny Frison art on the cover.
yeah. On the new cover, yep, yep,
I
yep.
suspect a cover gallery in the back,
I
some
well, see,
extra letters, and there is
well,
a letter from Tim Sale at the back of
well,
the regular one, but I think there will be a little bit more.
I would imagine since we haven't seen it that they keep the trend of using the main covers as chapter breaks. So
Yes.
you see Jenny Frison's covers in there and the one Scotty Young cover. Um, and there weren't a lot of variant covers for this series, but I know they were included. Some of the early issues that was included in Deluxe Volume 1. I have to imagine the compendium probably has the same back matter because there's a lot of back matter in deluxe editions. Early concept sketches,
Yeah,
scripts,
there's
things
like
like that.
three
Yeah,
or four pages in the single trades on that kind of stuff.
yeah, and so when you put them all together, you've got like 8 or 9 pages per deluxe edition. So if all that stuff's in the back of the compendium, you could be talking about like 30, 40 extra pages worth of material. So I wouldn't be shocked if that were all there. So basically all the material that's out there for revival all in one place. I would imagine it's all been included, everything that's been in print before. So yeah, no, it'll look good on a shelf, and so I look forward to that coming out.
Yeah. I Speaking of things I look forward to coming out, uh, next week we should have our episode with Tim Seeley and Mike Norton. We've never
Yeah,
interviewed two creators at the same time.
yeah,
Going to be a new thing for us. The two of them worked for years together. Alex and I have now done this for 2+ years together.
yeah,
So I'm like, I think it's going to be super fun to hear their collaboration come onto our collaboration. Then the week after that will be Halloween, which we will have a Halloween special. Not going to say anything else about it here.
yeah. It'll be a special one-off, not a one-shot, but a one-off episode. Yeah, and then after that, we'll return to generally normal, regularly scheduled program.
Business as usual. So,
Yes, yes.
all right. Well, thank you for listening. As always, share with a friend. Please like and subscribe if you don't already. Leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen, and we will see you next week.
Peace.